Hi, welcome to today's webinar, Enterprise Search in 2025. My name is Janessa Diane, and I'm the Events Manager here at Lucidworks. And I'm happy to be hosting this webinar today with our speaker, Lucidworks CMO, Vivek Sriram. Today, Vivek will be sharing how the most innovative companies fuel creativity and drive productivity with search experiences that connect people to insights when they need them. We'll leave time at the end of the webinar to answer any questions you may have. So please use the chat box on your screen to enter your questions throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer them live at the end of the presentation. Vivek, thanks for joining us today. Let's get started.
Thank you, Janessa. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. It's great to be with you. So enterprise search in 2025 is a pretty interesting topic. Enterprise search as a technology has been around for many, many years, but it's never really fully lived up to the hype. Though in recent times, it's really starting to become newly relevant again and sort of finding new purpose. Let's look today at why that's the case. And we're going to try and do that by looking at it through the lens of a large industry-shaping trend. This presentation is made of three parts. Part one is a little bit of a deeper dive into the trends and the supporting underpinning themes that support this thesis that enterprise search is relevant and morphing. The second part is about the technologies that make up enterprise search, NLP, AI, etc. And then the third part is about a use case. We can look at how an actual company might look at this in their workforce. Okay, so for most of you, I see in the attendee list that you're from many large companies. Probably digital transformation is top of mind to several of you. All the analysts call it one of the key CIO priorities. When I was putting this presentation together, I started to look at what different companies think about how to describe digital transformation. I'm not going to read out all the words in each individual bubble here, but the point I'm trying to prove here is that there is no one canonical definition for it. Everybody talks about it slightly differently. But if there is an underlying theme to it, it is that most interactions that people have either with each other or through technology or through even offline processes are often digital. And what this means is that the underlying workflows and processes and people interactions also consequently have to change. In terms of technology, particularly the parts that we care about for enterprise search, this means unifying information access and connecting people to insights when they need them. And for organizations, it's really about mastering data in order to make informed decisions. If you look at it this way, a couple of other quotes to talk about what the implications are, is that the workforce is changing. It's becoming younger, smarter, more technologically savvy as post-millennials particularly start to make ground into the workforce in large numbers. This is even more acute than true. The other consequence from it is that the rise of AI has led to broad swaths of automation across everything. So people and processes consequently have to be more intelligent and aware, not just repeat the same things that have typically happened over and over again. So what's causing these? Number one is that you can call it almost Amazon conditioning or Netflix conditioning, is that customers have very high expectations. In fact, you can say that 73% of customers prefer to do business with brands that personalize their shopping experience. And each time a consumer is exposed to an improved digital experience, their expectations are immediately reset to a new and higher level. 5 years or maybe 10 years ago, most of us used taxi cabs to get around major cities. Now hardly anyone does because of Uber or Lyft. So what this means inside the enterprise is that customer insights are critical to workflows. It's no longer enough that just the customer support agent or a frontline account manager is responsible for all customer interactions. It's really everybody inside of a company is responsible for knowing how customers are interacting and how to make an experience for them always better. And what's really enabling all of these things is AI. AI is a bit of a loaded term for any of us who went through computer science school. It tends to get, the word itself tends to get abused quite a bit in ways in which it sometimes loses all meaning. But we do take for granted many sophisticated interactions with AI. We've talked to machines like Alexa. Predictions about weather or stock or anything is just ubiquitous in our daily lives. And so as these things start to take form more and more in a workflow inside of a company, these trends and drivers are kind of mutually reinforcing of each other. The consequences then are sort of twofold. One is that it's no longer enough for workflows to be static. So 20 years ago, we might have bought a piece of CRM software that helped people in the sales organization repeatedly and consistently do the same piece of workflow the same way every time. Those kinds of things are important in certain cases, but becoming decreasingly so. It's far more important to have adaptable and flexible workflows, and where humans and machines can kind of coexist with each other, and where machines tend to perform the automatable tasks very well, and humans do the things that machines are not able to do. So leverage their creativity, handle one-off situations, deal with weird edge cases. And so what this fundamentally means is that the balance of power in organizations is shifting from just efficiency and automation to innovation and creativity. And the organizations that really will succeed are the ones who master this change well. Implications in terms of technology, we might think about them in two or three broad areas. One is that in order to really create adaptable and flexible workflows, it's critical to have unified information access. I'd even go one step beyond that and say unified insight access. Anybody from the most junior person in a support organization to a research scientist with 2 PhDs still need insights to do their jobs better and to be able to create and innovate. And in information access, which is perhaps where we can think about where enterprise search originally started, is expanding towards addressing insights more than just information. And insights become even more powerful when they're connected to actions. And the implications for organizations which can compete and succeed in this kind of an environment are ones that measure outcomes and not just activities, and ingrain this in a full life cycle of insights and empowering people to be able to act on them. Now, all that said, why is search interesting to address this particular situation? Why is search important for digital transformation? Odds are, if you ask 10 people in your company, how do you think about search and what does it mean for digital transformation? Anybody who's not in search might scratch their heads. They might be left wondering why. Well, it doesn't really make any sense. But I have kind of a unique point of view on it. The search is critical to making these kinds of things happen because in very many ways, search is the perfect UI. It's the universal interface. It requires no instruction manual for anyone to use. It hides massive amounts of complexity behind a simple box. And search itself has, over the last 20 years, has evolved significantly to where it's no longer just about 10 blue links on a page. It can be everything from a product recommendation, an expert finder that connects people to each other through topics and expertise. There are natural language interfaces that don't even require a person to type anything. They could ask the question naturally in their own voice. Search provides next best action and predictions to let people know what to do next. They power chatbots and virtual assistants to drive conversations. And they can do things like automatically extract topics into a knowledge graph to help people resolve problems, know what to do, see where to go, all kinds of things. So in very many ways, in this world of automation and creativity and innovation, where information is ubiquitous and insights are paramount, search is the most fundamental, important technology to enable that kind of a change. Now, if we look at it kind of over the last 2-3 decades, and enterprise search has been around for a long time, the promise and peril in it is both that people want a search-like interface because they're conditioned to Google, but the problem in most organizations is that there's not enough data to be able to provide as rich and sophisticated as an interface as Google's able to provide. So where we started out in the 1990s with intranets, just collecting simple pieces of information and providing people access to it, sort of evolved over time towards portals, fragmented into the applications. We think about it now in the next 10 years as being more connected and ubiquitous. where it's not necessarily a destination in a portal where a person goes to a box to ask a question, but it's a way of collecting, federating information across wherever they might live, and to be able to extract insights and deliver them to people just when they need them. Now, why is it that previous attempts have failed? They've failed for a couple of reasons. One is that many previous technologies have approached the search problem as a monolith, requiring the consolidation and extraction of all information into a single place with one oftentimes inscrutable engine, which may or may not expose its internal workings. And the second reason that previous attempts have failed is because search, it's critical for user behavior and user interaction in order to personalize and drive relevancy from search. And in many companies, not having either ready access to that or not having the compute resources to be able to readily make sense out of it handicaps search in very many ways. But we think that it's different a bit this time. It's different because of a couple of key driving reasons for it. One is that TF-IDF, which for those of you in the search world might know, it stands for Term Frequency Inverse Document Frequency. It's the algorithm that powers Lucene. Lucene is the most popular open source text search library. It powers Solr. It powers Lucidworks' product Fusion. It also underpins Elasticsearch and very, very many other things. TF-IDF looks at the tokens in a document and tries to make associations between them and to provide the right document in front of the right person. If for various reasons that it can be limited or limiting in terms of driving really solid relevancy. But wide accessibility to user behavior and user interactions augment some of the deficiencies in TF-IDF. So we can dig into that a little bit more as well. The second thing is that the wide prevalence of cloud computing, graphic processors, and cheap storage means that we now have a very cost-effective and incredibly scalable way to be able to store all this user behavior and process it almost in real time in order to be able to drive relevancy. And these things weren't available 10 or 20 years ago. And the third reason that it's different this time is because we have production-ready artificial intelligence available to us. And these are things like the semantic knowledge graph, which is a piece of technology that a couple of engineers at Lucidworks built and have donated into Apache. It lets, in real time, build very sophisticated and comprehensive connections between entities, topics, meaning, people, terms, in order to deliver insights to people when they need them. Natural language processing, machine learning, computer vision, deep learning, these have all started to get to a point where they're mature enough to where it's possible for us to use them at a scalable basis to make search much more better than it used to be. So I kind of think about the future of enterprise search as, along these four axes. And what should it look like? One is that it should be distributed. We know from the past that monolithic search engines don't tend to work well, and any kind of dictatorial approaches to asking people to centralize information often leads to failure. So distributed is one key tenet. The second is open. It's pretty clear, even though there are several legacy proprietary enterprise search vendors out there, almost everybody has open source at their core. Lucidworks, the sponsoring company behind the Apache Solr project, uses very many open source technologies inside of our platform. The reason that this is important is because in most places don't have the luxury of having a full-time search staff. And so requiring people, developers who are busy and might be dealing with multiple other things to learn a proprietary stack or a proprietary API is difficult and cumbersome and gets in the way of their productivity. So open standards, open architectures give companies and give organizations a way to be able to better deploy their architects and engineering resources. Scalable, it probably goes without saying that these are almost table stakes, but that placing any restrictions on the amount of data, the volume of data processed, IOs or queries, or even the variety of data is not really tenable. Information resides in all kinds of different places, and it looks in it takes all kinds of different shapes. It could be video or voice or text, or it could be logs. It could be structured data out of a database. And search engines are really great because they really don't care about what the underlying data is. They're pretty good at dealing with all these different kinds of things. So to put any kind of artificial restriction on it is likely to limit adoption. So we see the future of search as distributed, open, scalable, and finally flexible. That it shouldn't have to just require a person to go and enter in query terms into a box, or require people to have a premonition about what they want to know. Oftentimes we might want to know about things which we're not able to clearly describe. So the system itself should be assistive and helpful and flexible in dealing with a wide variety of users and a wide variety of user scenarios and a wide variety of interfaces. And so given these four tenets, then the benefits that accrue from a futuristic modern enterprise search engine is that it delivers results that are personal, it has a highly user-centric experience, and it produces results that are relevant and topical. So what are the technologies that enable these kinds of changes to happen? And to going back to what we were saying earlier about we've tried to do enterprise search for a couple of decades now, and most of them have been unsuccessful. It's different this time because there are really, really mature underpinning technologies, everything from NLP and AI, but also cloud computing, TensorFlow, all kinds of different open source AI models, anything from K-means to logistic regression, highly capable cluster management tools like Zookeeper. All of these things are free, open, highly mature, and they support some of the largest workloads in the world. But getting these things together in a place in which all of these technologies can make sense of any possible kind of data, whether system generated or human generated or application generated, and to be able to add value to it and manifest it in a user interface that a non-technical person can use is a very, very difficult and challenging task. It may not be so hard if you only have 10,000 documents and one file share, but most organizations don't look like that. If we're dealing with hundreds of millions or billions of documents across multiple file types, repositories, and user profiles, and geographies and linguistic dependencies, then the number, the kind and scope and complexity of technologies involved in making sense out of all of it can be quite daunting. These bubbles here are meant to illustrate just some of the challenges involved in dealing with data variance at very large scale. What we do at Lucidworks is to simplify some of that stuff. We're still premised on the belief that open architectures and open systems are the best way to engineer scalable systems of the future. But what we do is package a lot of this stuff up together so that people who may not necessarily be search experts or who may be search experts but prefer to spend their time on more value-creating activities are able to use a platform like what we have and to be able to deliver the modern workplace at very large scale and distributed across multiple geographies. Just to kind of read this out left to right, if you think about it, we have Lucidworks Fusion as our flagship platform. We support data connectors and output connectors to hundreds of different data sources. These things could be user behavior or machine effluent, things that we call system generated. They could be actual text, PowerPoints, Word files, what have you, things that are human generated, and transactions that might sit in ERP or CRM or other kinds of enterprise systems. So we make no restrictions on what people can put into it. What we do, though, is take that, run it through AI at ingest time to do things like named entity recognition, phrase detection, part of speech tagging, document classification. All of these apply various different kinds of AI techniques to pull this off effectively. Fusion Server is our where we persist and store all the aggregates and predictions from the ingest time. So this includes the search engine, which is Apache Solr. We have connectors and ETL pipelines and various other monitoring and administrative capabilities. If people want to talk directly to it using SQL, they're more than welcome to do so. The results also come back as as JSON, and they can dump it out into a data visualization tool like Tableau. So in that case, it doesn't even look like a search engine. We also apply AI on the way out. These are at runtime, at query time. So things like query pipelines, intent detecting to understand user intent so that we're best able to deliver highly personalized and relevant results. Recommendation engines and multiple A/B testing frameworks. Optionally, our customers can also choose to deploy a product we call Fusion App Studio. This is a modern stateless visual designer, visual UI builder. It's purpose-built for search applications, so not repurposing Eclipse or a Visual Studio or something like that to do search, but this is built from the ground up just to let people rapidly develop search applications. We also ship with a number of templates for anything from Customer 360 to clinical trials and things like that that accelerate quick deployment. So all of this runs on a set of scalable operations. If you remember from the previous slide, I talked about scalability and flexibility as core tenets to how we think about the future of search. So we built Fusion from the ground up to be able to handle billions of documents and thousands of users across any cloud or a hybrid environment. So many of our customers tend to be very large companies. They have complex entitlement and data custodianship requirements. So they like to run some workloads in certain private clouds, in other public clouds, and to be able to mix and match the outputs and store them independently. So we provide the flexibility to do that. And it's our belief that fundamentally, if we make the case that search is critical to transforming the digital workplace, then search also has to run on a modern infrastructure that can fully be extensible and scalable across all these things. So I'm doing a just quick time check here. So when I make reference to the digital workplace, the way we think about search in the role of search inside of the workplace is to provide users three main benefits. Number one, the obvious one is exploring data, right? So they could explore data through an actual search box. They can obtain data from recommendations that a machine puts out. It could be system-generated predictions that sit inside of their workflows and through other systems. An example of that is if any of you use Salesforce, Einstein provides predictions inside of opportunity fields and for account tagging. It's more or less a search function. We can do similar things like that as well, and we think that that's kind of the future of work. The second thing is integrate. What I mean by this here is that the explosion of function-specific workflow and analytic tools is not slowing down anytime. Just in marketing technology alone, there are probably 5,000 or 6,000 different kinds of SaaS packages. So because of the fact that we have unique systems for every single possible workflow, it's really important that a modern enterprise search engine be able to securely connect to all of these things, perhaps leave the data where they originate, but to be able to make sense out of all of them by respecting access controls and user entitlements. It's a pretty difficult challenge, especially for most large enterprises who may be dealing with complex SharePoint or other kinds of document repositories. And the third thing, what we call curate, is really a metaphor for saying that any machine, any engine, no matter how smart it is, will run into limits. And humans, almost without exception, are better at spotting patterns and edge cases than machines are. So there are oftentimes requirements and needs in organizations to have experts override machine-generated relevancy. We call this curation. So there are certain situations where it makes a lot of sense to have people override or alter the predictions and the results that machines generate. So let's kind of look at this in the lens of a fictional company. If any of you watch Fletch, hopefully you'll see that some of these characters are a bit familiar. This is an energy company. If a user inside of this company were to go in and type in natural language a query like who knows about oil and gas in Brazil, this question hides an enormous amount of complexity. I want to try and just call out a couple of things that happen in the background to enable a quick result. Somewhat of a prosaic question, but there's actually quite a bit going on underneath it. Number one is that is a modern distributed architecture, which is able to deliver performance in real time at very large scale. Second, maybe we can spend just a couple seconds on this and talk about it a bit more, is what we call signal-driven relevancy. And what this is incorporating user behavior to adjust the lexical ranking that TF-IDF might produce on its own. And the benefit from it is that, or the impact from it is that we're able to adjust results in real time with user information, metadata like role, department, other kinds of things that we might be able to pull out both from directory services, but also from other kinds of observable system level data. And the benefit is much more personalized results, reduced frustration, and more productivity. So we extend this a bit further, and in the same question, says any large company is likely to have multiple different file repositories, and people will always work in multiple different kinds of file formats. What we're trying to illustrate through this screen cap is a situation where that same query result presents results or that same query results documents across multiple file types, across multiple people, with geographic and location-based search involved, and federated across third-party systems. In this case, this is just pulling out an address from Wikipedia. So similar kind of a thread. Well, how does it's a nice interface of what's actually making all of that stuff happen? One is technologies like entity extraction, which recognize people, places, things, categorize them appropriately, and pushes them into the right place at the user interface. The benefit from it is that we're radically able to dramatically improve search precision so that people can do their jobs better. Lucidworks Fusion ships with 200 odd connectors. We also have a very advanced connector SDK, so if we don't have a connector, you can certainly build one. And why these are important is that organizations all have multiple data repositories, and modern search engines, this is an age-old problem, but it's even more acute now than it was 2 decades ago, is to be able to access all these things in real time at very large scale. And finally, security. Security is critical to all companies, but especially for large companies. So to be able to respect role-based access control or early binding, late binding models, various directory level permissions, all of these things have to happen at ingest time so that the search engine knows who's allowed to see what document and is able to prevent misuse. This is a very, very difficult thing to do at large companies which might have very large numbers of heterogeneous, disparate data sources. Okay, so just extending a little bit further then, I'm going to say, well, this Irwin Fletcher example a bit further, we say, how does search itself? The point I was trying to show on this slide is that all of the interesting things that happen here are in the search results. There are various different ways to represent the UI, to gather and tag and present the results, and these things work best when they learn from past behavior and get better over time. And one of the reasons that enterprise search has typically failed in the past is because the systems were not smart enough to learn from past mistakes and to learn from user interactions. We have very many remedies for these kinds of things now. Fusion is a self-learning engine. It does get better with age and with use. The second thing is that people want to be able to explore on their own terms and to be able to dictate queries on their own terms. One person may really like to have single word queries. A pharma researcher, on the other hand, might have very complex 60, 70 or more word heterogeneous queries. The engine has to be able to address both of those things. And so query understanding and intent understanding it's crucial to making search work well. It's also a pretty difficult thing to pull off well. So it's a bit of a humble brag on the Lucidworks side. We are placed well. Analysts think highly about what we do. But even more interestingly than where Lucidworks, our company, is positioned in this quadrant is the fact that analysts are covering these things in more interesting ways than they did before. Enterprise search is more relevant now than it ever was before, in part because analysts like Gartner in this case, or Forrester, have started to really reconsider and come to terms of how important enterprise search is to the modern digital workplace. Gartner they don't even call it enterprise search anymore, they call it insight engines. The analyst Forrester calls it cognitive search and knowledge discovery. These are all, fundamentally, they're still using these words to describe search. My point here more is that don't take just our word for why search is critical in the next 5 years. Some of the biggest analysts in the world also feel the same way. So in closing, enterprise search is more relevant now than ever because we all live in highly information-saturated worlds. For any of us to do our jobs well, we have to have access both to information and to insights. And if we don't get it quickly and actionably, we run the risk of being overrun by data overload and not being able to do anything. Search, as I like to say, is the perfect UI. It doesn't require any training, and it masks an inordinate amount of complexity. And the real benefit from that is that it really enables innovation as well as efficiency. So I'm going to stop there and open up the question window and go through them.
Great, thanks, Vivek. So we have time for a few questions now. So for any last-minute questions you have, feel free to insert them into the chat box. But for now, we do have a few that are lined up. So one of the questions is, why shouldn't we just use open source?
So there are a couple of good reasons for not doing it. One is that if you have a pool of engineers who are really good at open source, they're by definition, by virtue, they're highly sophisticated and capable people. I'm not sure that the best use of their time and their talents is spent on racking and stacking and gluing open source together. You probably want those folks working on harder problems and things that are more domain specific, and that go beyond just the infrastructure management, plumbing, and wiring things together. So that's one reason. The second reason is that Lucidworks is a sponsoring company behind Solr. We're very strongly committed to the open source community, but where we take the view that the infrastructure, security, scale, flexibility, extensibility, all of those things belong in open source. The things that are domain specific, so next best action for financial services or clinical trials research for pharma, those things are not going to be done very well out of open source. That's not the strength of the community. People don't get into open source to go work on those kinds of things. So there is a fine balance here, and it may be different for different people's sakes. If it's a simple use case and you're able to achieve all your objectives with open source alone, go right at it. From what we see, our ideal customer profiles are very large companies and global companies. For them, the risk versus reward of getting a fully baked end-to-end package like us that still gives them the benefit of open source. It's at the end of the day, if someone decides that they don't want to use Fusion, they're not locked in, right? They don't have to. They can go back to open source. They won't get all the benefits that Fusion has, but the customers do. The customers do not have. They don't suffer lock-in as such. So that's kind of our view on it.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, can you speak a bit more on SKG and how it's used in Fusion Engine?
Sure. So there's also there's a really good blog post that Trey Granger, who built SKG, put out. It's on our website. If you go to lucidworks.com/blog, if you go and search for it, you'll find it. There's some code samples and examples in there as well. But SKG is really a way to tie together entities, people, places, things, sentiment, topics, all together in a really extensible graph. And so the data structure is a graph. And what that gives us is a way to deliver personalization and relevance. And it can manifest in a whole bunch of different ways. So autocomplete, for instance, you get better autocomplete by leveraging SKG. You get better digimine or spell check by using SKG. So there's a whole bunch of places inside of Fusion, other features that rely on SKG to do to perform their functions better. You can also reach out to one of us. I'm sure we can share our contact information. We can definitely dig into it further. I encourage you to read our blog about SKG as well. But we'd be happy to have a follow-up and discuss more.
Great point, Vivek. Yeah, that's right. As a reminder, the slides will be distributed at the end of the webinar when it's ready, and as well as the recording. And we'll also send you a follow-up email with some of those resources that Vivek mentioned. We have one more question here. Does Lucidworks include an engine to automate semantic web elements, assuming that the underlying content objects follow Dublin or POD or other MD standards?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is that this is a pretty specific question. We should probably dig into it a bit more. The devil's in the details on these things. We typically do conform to open standards and systems, so if it's well described, we will support them. If it's not in the product right now for some reason, I'll give you a slightly different example, but I hope it serves to illustrate your question. We have plugins into various speech to text converters. So we can pick and choose whatever one you want. And all of that stuff is built in a pluggable way. So if it's something that we don't support right now, we can certainly consider adding it into the roadmap and getting it out at a future time. Janessa, if you don't mind, there's an interesting question here, which I hope I can answer. There's a question: how is that different from the ELK approach, other than IP tech underneath? So Logstash is for any of you who are not familiar with ELK. ELK stands for Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. It's the stack that underpins the really popular Elasticsearch platform. Elasticsearch is a search engine similar to Fusion, similar to Solr. Logstash is ETL, more or less, and Kibana is data visualization. ELK is particularly good for dealing with metrics and events and logs. Kibana has got all kinds of different visualization that let people look at time series data, and logs, and then look for anomalies in logs and things like that. And Logstash, the ETL tool, is also really well suited for getting emits from. It's got output plugins into hundreds of different data sources, machine data sources. So EC2, S3, Dynamo, anything you can imagine will spit out events and logs into Logstash. But it's kind of really well suited to doing that. Our connector framework, like we don't stop people from wanting to analyze logs, but that's not the main benefit from Fusion. What Lucidworks is trying to provide is ways for people to interact, look at text, mine text, and extract insights from text. So for the corollary to Logstash for us is our connector framework. We don't have a great name for it, unfortunately, but it's the connector framework, and it connects to a number of document repositories. We do have database connectors as well, but mainly what we're trying to do is do things like Documentum or SharePoint or S3, Box, stuff like that. So we're very good at text. And then on the data visualization side, very roughly speaking, App Studio is kind of the Lucidworks equivalent to Kibana. I think App Studio's got quite a bit more capabilities, but it's built for search applications. It's not really a data visualization tool as such. It's a more fully featured user interface for building search apps.
Last question here. This person is asking if they can get a demo, which is a great question.
Oh, of course, absolutely we can. We can get you a demo on it. Another great resource, if you're interested, if you go to lucidworks.com/labs, LADS, we have a number of pre-built applications that you can try out. We run it on Google Cloud Platform. It's free for you to try. We'll give you a 2-week trial. Then there's some videos and other kinds of things for you to see there as well. Our YouTube channel has a couple of really, really good connectors and enterprise search demos, but we would be happy to schedule time with you and have a phone conference, a web conference, what have you, and dig deep into it and show you a personal demo as well.
Great, thank you. Well, that about wraps up our webcast. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Vivek, for presenting and sharing your time today. Like I said before, we're going to send you the materials for this webinar, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on our website. Thanks, Vivek. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you, everybody, for your time. Bye.